right, AP World History students, this is Mr. Shally. The AP World History exam questions just got released. This is Saturday morning, May 9th. I'm going to walk through them right now. I haven't looked at them yet, so I'm going to kind of look at these cold, sort of similar to what you would have done when you took the exam on Thursday morning. And we'll kind of see how it goes. I'll probably break this up into little parts. So we're going to start with SAQs first. So we'll scroll here. Got your instructions. All right. Let's see what we got here. In the year 1324 CE, a memorable event took place in Cairo. Mansa Musa. Wow, they did a Mansa Musa SAQ. How lucky are we? Because we talked about Mansa Musa quite a bit, I feel like. Ruler of the West African Empire of Mali, stopped there for 3 days during a pilgrimage to Mecca. Cairo at this time was an extremely sophisticated metropolis, and its inhabitants would not ordinarily have paid much attention to foreign travelers, but Mansa Musa was so wealthy that his expenditures of gold and his conversions with local notables were recorded in great detail. Remember when I stood on a table and said Mansa Musa went to Cairo and was making it rain gold, and I was making a whole big deal out about that? I feel really good about doing that now. The story of Mansa Musa tells a good deal about the role of the Sahara in world history. First, it shows that by the 14th century, the Great Desert could be safely crossed, even by a mighty king carrying precious gold and accompanied by a large body of followers. Second, it indicates that the lands to the south of the Sahara were organized into large states, and that at the least some of these and their inhabitants had become pious Muslims. Finally, it tells us something about the economic basis for more regular trans-Saharan travel, as West African gold was of great value for both the Islamic world and the Christian Europe during the late Middle Ages. Source: Ralph A. Austin, United States historian of Africa, Trans-Saharan Africa in World History, book published in 2010. All right, questions. Describe one likely reason for Mansa Musa's journey to Cairo and Mecca. The Hajj pilgrimage, that Muslims are, if they're able at some point in their life, they're supposed to try to go on the Hajj pilgrimage from wherever they live to Mecca in what is now Saudi Arabia. That would be number one. You could definitely also say that, he's trying to establish some sort of trade relations, or he's, participating in trade going back and forth from his homeland in West Africa to Cairo and then to Mecca. But the number one reason for why he made that journey was the Hajj, which was the Islamic pilgrimage from to Mecca, which is something that is a core element of that religion. B, describe one piece of evidence not found in the passage that could be used to support the claim made by the author in the second paragraph. Okay. The story of Mansa Musa tells a good deal about the role of the Sahara in world history. Okay. So you could talk about in this, what other things? It indicates that the lands to the south of the Sahara were organized into large states, and that at least some of the inhabitants had become pious Muslims. So the claims are that basically the Sahara Desert was important, and that people had converted to Islam in that part of the world. And then also that gold was of great value for the Islamic world and Christian Europe during the late Middle Ages. So you could latch onto any one of those. My gut feeling here is you want to talk about the trans-Saharan trade was a significant trade route going on across Africa during this time. Timbuktu, which was sort of the capital of the Mali Empire, was a significant hub of Islamic learning. Many people were able to cross the Sahara Desert, and it was an important trade route in the gold and salt trade, something along those lines. People used camel saddles, camels, caravans in order to travel across the Sahara Desert. It tells us that something about the economic basis for more regular trans-Saharan travel, as West African gold was of great value for both the Islamic world and Christian Europe during the late Middle Ages. I guess you could kind of try to latch onto something that's like gold was something that people sought after. It came from Africa. Um, West Africa was known for having gold. We looked at that map, the Catalan Atlas, where we had the picture of Mansa Musa holding the softball sized piece of gold. And you could say that like people, Europeans knew about the existence of gold in this part of the world during that time. Using a specific example, explain how long-distance trade routes affected the societies they connected in the period 1200 to 1450. Wow, you could go in so many different directions here. How did long-distance trade routes affect societies they connected in the period 1200 to 1450? There's 3 trade routes you could be really talking about that are in the course curriculum: the Silk Road, Trans-Saharan trade routes, and Indian Ocean trade. You could talk about how Islam spread across the Indian Ocean through Indian Ocean trade as traders start, making connections across that region. You could talk about technologies spreading across the Silk Road, such as gunpowder, paper, coming from China to the rest of like the Middle East and then eventually onto Europe. You could talk about Islam spreading across the trans-Saharan trade routes, and then that religion spreading across North Africa into West and then sub-Saharan Africa. There's a lot. That is a very open question because there's no geographic like predict or parameter for that question. You could talk about so many different things. It's got to be from that early time period, though. Silk Road, Trans-Saharan trade, Indian Ocean trade. You could talk about the development of the Swahili language along West Africa. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there. Okay, this is interesting that they put this in, and this is a difference. And I guess I'm gonna editorialize a little bit as I do this. What the College Board has done over the past few years is what I think they're doing is they're giving students more opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge. So about 10 years ago, if you had this question, I would guess that they would have put a geographic parameter on letter C. Now they're not. They're just saying any long distance trade route. Maybe before they would have said in Africa, or they would have said in the Indian Ocean region, but now they got any of them. And ultimately that does give you, the student, a chance to just demonstrate any of your knowledge about this time period. The key thing is you're going to have to be in that time period, 1200 to 1450. And you got to talk about a long distance trade route and how it somehow affected societies. I guess, going once again back to the Silk Road, if you wanted to jump in there with the Mongols uniting the Silk Road and connecting disparate regions, I bet you would probably find a way to get credit with that too. All right, nice. I like that one. Let's go to question 2. The inhabitants of India, as far as I have been able to see, have very little interest in learning about divine things. Sir, you know very well what a hard business it is to teach people who do not have any knowledge of God to give up their sinful habits. All right, just giving you some strategy here. Who is this guy? I'm going to go read the source. All right, he obviously is pretty biased for his personal culture. So let's go see who he is. Francis Xavier, Spanish Jesuit missionary in India, letter to the leader of the Catholic Jesuit Order, 1549. All right, he's a Christian missionary. The Jesuits were like a subsect of the Catholic Church. So he's obviously pretty into his religion, and he's looking at the other people with their differing beliefs, and he's not too big on them. All right, sir, you know very well what a hard business it is to teach people who do not have any knowledge of God to give up their sinful habits. They dislike it so much that it is most difficult to get them to hear us if we begin to preach about it. And they think it like death to be asked to become Christians. Yeah, people generally don't want to change their religion. Certainly, if the Portuguese were kinder to new converts to Christianity, a greater number would convert. But as things stand, the Indians see the converts are despised and looked down upon by the Portuguese. So it is natural that they are unwilling to become converts themselves. For all these reasons, there is no longer need for me to labor in India. But I have learned that there is a country near China called Japan which has been untouched by Jewish or Muslim teachings, and whose inhabitants are very eager to learn what they do not know about things divine and things natural. I am determined to go there as soon as I can. Whoa, this is an awesome document. Because as we know maybe later, Japan becomes pretty not into outside teachings. So this guy was wrong. He will be proved to be wrong later on. All right. Letter A. Describe one technology that allowed Europeans in the period circa 1450 to 1750 to travel to the regions mentioned in the passage. Europeans going to India. How did they get there? It's technologies. Caravel is a boat that let them get there. The use of the lateen sail would have helped them people navigate into the Indian Ocean. The compass, the astrolabe, those are all things that help people navigate. Okay, I feel like all those would get credit. I feel like if you probably find a way to get credit if you explain how the printing press was used to potentially spread knowledge, paper-based knowledge of navigation of some sort. You could go back to like map making, cartography that kind of came from. There was some Islamic cartography map making that was sort of started in earlier time periods and was expanded upon by the Europeans. I wonder if you would get credit for gunpowder, because having military strength did kind of let people travel in a way. I don't love that answer, but I wonder if it comes time for the grading, if gunpowder is going to get credit if you explain it in a way that's like, this allowed people to travel more freely. Gunpowder doesn't get you from A to B, but it allows you to go from A to B a little more easily if you have military strength. I don't know about that, but we're really looking for those travel methods. Caravel, carrack, maybe the flout. I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit later. And it's more of a trading vessel. Those are things that I would say would be helping Europeans get to the Indian, the Indian subcontinent. All right, we're going back to letter B here. I had a little issue. Describe one example from any world region that would support the author's claim in the second paragraph about European treatment of indigenous people. Okay, look at the second paragraph. Certainly, if the Portuguese were kinder to new converts to Christianity, a greater number would convert. But as things stand, the Indians see the converts are despised and looked down upon by the Portuguese. So it is natural that they were unwilling to become converts themselves. So the author's claim is that if the Europeans were nicer to people who converted to Christianity, they would get more people to convert. Okay, so when you look at this question, it says any world region, and it does not have a time limit. Okay, so you can think about any place that the Europeans went where they were practicing some sort of conversion to Christianity, and where they were kind of like, forceful, mean. And maybe if they would have been nicer, they would have got more converts to Christianity. Okay, so we could definitely go to North America, where Europeans kind of came in and sort of made war on the native people in modern day Mexico, North America, and then also in South America, like with the Inca. I bet you could argue that that if they had been nicer to those people, their conversion efforts would have been more effective. Okay, how about in Africa when the Europeans start to imperialize Africa, mostly the British and the French, they a lot of times they weren't very nice, right? They were very forceful. What about the Belgians coming in and forcing all this coerced labor for rubber in the 1800s? You could argue that, well, if they had been more supportive or less cruel in their treatment, they would have got more people to convert to Christianity. Uh, what about Australia? I feel like you could argue Australia with the indigenous population in Australia, the British coming in there. There's a lot of tension there. That there potentially could have been more conversions to Christianity at that point too. That seems like answers that could all get credit. I'm thinking of China and Japan, but there were European missionary activities there, so I guess you could probably find a way to get credit for that as well. Okay, explain how missionary activities by religious figures such as Francis Xavier were challenged during the period 1450 to 1850. Certain areas became isolationists and did not want Christian ideas in their region. Now, look at the time period on this. Japan will definitely fall in this. Like the Japanese society before the Meiji Restoration was definitely resistant to Christian missionaries and even executed them in great numbers. When it comes to there's the 1850 is a key thing with the time period, because you think about resistance to like European influence, that's going to take out. You're not going to be able to do Boxer Rebellion. You're not going to be able to do Sepoy Rebellion because that's like, even though Sepoy Rebellion wasn't necessarily a reaction to missionary activities, it was a reaction to European incursion into India. That's 1857. Boxer Rebellion is later on in China. You could say in North America, many Native American peoples refused to convert to Christianity. The same thing happened in South America as well. One of the people maybe you could drop as one of our content terms, Tupac Amaru, was one of the freedom fighters in South America resisting the Spanish. Yeah, that's that one. That would be a little bit of a challenge. I'm trying to think of other ones. Not any ones are popping up off the top of my head right now. All right, I'm gonna go on to the 3 and 4. Let's go 3 first. Describe one geographic or environmental characteristic of the Indian Ocean trade network in the period circa 1200 to 1450. Indian Ocean monsoon winds. Any geographic or environmental characteristic. The ocean was big and connected East Africa, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. They had navigators charted the monsoon winds and understood like the comings and goings of the monsoon winds. Yeah, monsoon winds is what they're looking for there. B, explain how technological or economic developments contributed to the growth of trade in the Indian Ocean in the period circa 1200 to 1450. Long distance trade of luxury goods motivated people to trade back and forth across that region. I'll go back to the old golden rhinoceros lesson we did, where they talked about the gold coming from or the rhinoceros figure coming from India and getting transported and sold in the southern part of Africa. A technological development would be the mapping of the monsoon winds. It would also be the lateen sail. You could also do astrolabe. You could also do compass. And then those are all technological things. Economic developments would be potentially just the long distance trade of luxury goods, silk, ivory, jewels, gold, were all desired by different people across the Indian Ocean region. So that would all be adequate. Letter C. Explain the growth of trade in the Indian Ocean. How the growth of trade in the Indian Ocean affected states or societies in the period circa 1200 to 1450. Okay, states or societies. The growth of trade in the Indian Ocean created diasporic Muslim communities across the Indian Ocean region. Okay, straight out of the CED. The growth of trade in the Indian Ocean affected societies because religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam spread across the Indian Ocean region and took hold in places where they're not originally from. Right? Islam spread all the way across into Southeast Asia, along East Africa. Hinduism goes from India and does spread into Southeast Asia. And Buddhism also is found across Southeast Asia, coming from India originally as well. The states grow in power. China has you could have Ming Dynasty in Zhang talking about spreading diplomatic power, or diplomatic ties, I guess, across the Indian Ocean region. Zhang goes from China all the way to Africa and India, making connections along the way. The Vijayanagara Empire in southern India grows in power due to trade. Those are things, but the letter C literally is straight from the CED. Diasporic Muslim communities develop in the Indian Ocean region because of trade. It's something just like that. I don't have it memorized, but it's very similar to that. Number 4, describe one change in global trade during the period circa 1750 to 1914. Steamships allowed for the greater facilitated trade across oceans. Railroads facilitated the movement of goods across far distances and made it significantly easier to move goods from one place to another. Those are things that are resulting from the Industrial Revolution. Those are key things. Global trade, as Europeans, especially the British, imperialized areas across the world, they often extracted resources from those places, such as cotton from India, in order to participate, to facilitate the trade of those goods and make money off of them. Those would all be changes in global trade. The world becomes much more connected between the years 1750 and 1914 than it was previously to that. Explain how economic or political developments in Europe shaped global trade during the period circa 1750 to 1914. Economic or political developments. As European nations, such as Great Britain, become more wealthy because of the Industrial Revolution, they were able to imperialize areas around the world and gain power from that, and thus have more influence on the trade of goods between those parts of the world. Explain trying to think if we can relate the Atlantic revolutions to this. Explain how economic political developments in Europe shaped global trade during the period circa 1750 to 1914. Um, you know, Britain and France are going to lose a lot of their colonial holdings in the New World or the Americas. And so they're going to look to find resources and imperialize areas in other parts of the world and try to set up trade relations with those places. Most notably, this would be like uh, Britain looking towards India, France looking towards Africa, and then eventually Southeast Asia, like in Vietnam. C. Explain how global trade affected non European states or societies during the period circa 1750 to 1914. Um, as the European societies were industrializing and gaining a lot of economic strength and political power from industrialization, a lot of non European states like China were kind of left behind during this time period and did not keep up with the rapid um, industrialization that the Europeans were doing. I guess you could probably, you got to be non-European. So you could go to like Japan, be like, in order to keep up with European industrialization in the late 1800s and the connections that were felt because of industrialization. Japan underwent the Meiji Restoration, and they tried to catch up with the ability to maintain trade relationships with other parts of the world, and also they began to imperialize other parts of the world as well, especially in the Southeast Asia and Asia. Other global trade. Oh, letter C. Global trade. How did it affect non-European states? European nations such as Belgium sought to imperialize areas of Africa, like the Congo, and extract resources from the Congo in order to sell them and make money, most notably rubber. There's also the resource extraction in South America of guano. We talk about the bat and bird poop that was used for fertilizer. Those are all resource extraction from other parts of the world that are not European. All right, those SAQs, all very, very fair. They're not easy. I wouldn't say they're easy. All right, but if you are studying, if you're teaching to the CED, to the what the course is designed to teach and told to teach, all this stuff is 100% covered. And so yeah, I'm happy with those questions. They're good.